After my husband died, I finally started dating again. Then, someone from my grief support group started photographing us together and leaving dead flowers on his grave, with notes saying, "Traitors burn in hell." Neil died on our anniversary. Heart attack in the parking lot of the restaurant where we'd had our first date. I held him while strangers did CPR, but I knew. 23 years together, and I knew the moment he was gone. The grief support group saved my life. Not dramatically. No one talked me off a ledge or anything. But Wednesday nights at St. Andrews gave me a reason to shower, to leave the house, to pretend I was still a functioning person. Harold, our facilitator, had this gentle way of making you feel heard without pushing too hard. Lucis joined about 2 months after me. His wife Elena had died in a car accident. Sweet guy. Absolutely shattered. There was another man who started coming around the same time. Never caught his name. Quiet. Intense. Always sat next to Lucis. Brought him coffee. That kind of thing. I liked the group. We were all walking wounded, but there was comfort in that shared pain. Jennifer lost her daughter. Keith's partner died of AIDS. Linda's husband had cancer. We'd cry, share memories, sometimes even laugh. Harold called it holding space for each other. After 8 months, I met Samantha. I wasn't looking. Honestly, I was buying wine at Trader Joe's at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, clearly crushing life. She was behind me in line and made a joke about my 3 bottles of Pinot Noir and frozen pizzas. "Tuesday book club must be lit," she said. I laughed. Actually laughed. First time since Neil. We grabbed coffee. Just coffee. She was divorced, had 2 teenagers, taught high school English. I told her about Neil on our 3rd coffee date. Cried right there in Starbucks. She didn't run. Instead, she said, "He sounds wonderful. Tell me more about him." That's what people don't understand. Dating Samantha didn't mean forgetting Neil. She asked about him all the time. Wanted to see photos, hear stories. She understood that Neil would always be part of me. "I'm not trying to replace him," she said once. "I just want to add to your life, not subtract from it." I kept going to group. Wednesdays were sacred. Samantha understood that too. But I stopped crying every session. Started sharing happy memories instead of just the final moments. Harold said my energy had shifted. Lucis noticed too. We'd become close friends. Elena and Neil were buried in the same cemetery. He was the only one I told about Samantha at first. "That's beautiful, man," he said. "Elena would want me to be happy too, when I'm ready." But that quiet guy, Lucis's shadow, he looked at me differently after that, like I'd confessed to unaliving instead of coffee dates. I started noticing him more. He came to every meeting but rarely shared. Took notes though, lots of notes. When Jennifer mentioned she'd joined a hiking club and met someone nice, I saw him write something down, underlining it twice. When Robert brought his new girlfriend's cookies to share, the guy stared at them like they were poisoned. Lucis pulled back from him after a while. "He's getting a little intense," he told me. "Showed up at my house unannounced twice last week. Gets upset when I can't hang out." Then Lucis met someone, a teacher at his nephew's school. They hit it off at a parent-teacher conference he attended for his sister. The quiet guy found out somehow. The temperature in the room dropped whenever Lucis spoke after that. Those notes got more frantic. I watched him mouth the word traitor once when Lucis was sharing. Things got weird fast. The guy started attending multiple grief groups. I ran into him at one across town when I was visiting my sister. He didn't recognize me at first, too busy scribbling notes about some widow who'd gone on a date. When he did see me, his face went dark. "Different approaches to healing," he said. Didn't sound like healing to me. Samantha and I had been together 6 months when she got the first email. Someone had created a fake account using Neil's name. The subject line, "You're unaliving my memory." Photos of us together, taken from distances. Restaurant receipts. Even a recording of me laughing at something Samantha said. The message, "He promised till death do us part. Death doesn't end promises." I was terrified. Samantha was furious. We went to the police, but they said without explicit threats, it was just harassment. "Change your email," they said. "Be careful," they said. I stopped going to group. Couldn't face seeing him there, taking his notes, judging us all. Lucis understood. He'd gotten similar messages about dishonoring Elena. So had Linda, Jennifer, anyone who dared to live after loss. Samantha moved in anyway. "I'm not letting some creep dictate our lives," she said, unpacking boxes in what used to be just Neil's and my home. She was brave, braver than me. The emails escalated. Photos of Neil's grave with fresh flowers, flowers I hadn't left, messages about true love and sacred vows. Then came the package, Neil's obituary, laminated, with Samantha's face scratched out of every photo of us together. The note, "Soon you'll understand real loss again." That's when I knew this wasn't going to stop. We installed security cameras, changed locks, varied our routines. But love makes you stupid, makes you think you're safer than you are, makes you believe that happiness is stronger than someone else's rage. I was right about one thing though, it didn't stop. The security system went off at 3 a.m. the following Tuesday. I jolted awake, Samantha already reaching for her phone. The motion sensors had triggered in the backyard. We watched the camera feed together, hearts pounding, nothing, just shadows and wind. Then we saw it. A figure in dark clothing had been there moments before, spray painting something on our fence before disappearing. I threw on shoes and a jacket, ignoring Samantha's protests about waiting for daylight. The message glowed white against the wood. "Traitors burn in hell." Below it, 2 dates, Neil's death date and Elena's. The paint was still wet, dripping like tears. Samantha called the police while I took photos. The officer who showed up looked barely old enough to drive. He took notes, said they'd increase patrols, but we both knew it meant nothing. Vandalism wasn't a priority, not until someone got hurt. The next morning, I found Lucis at my door. His hands shook as he showed me his phone. Similar messages, but worse. Photos of Elena's grave desecrated with red paint spelling tramp. His new girlfriend's car tires slashed. A dead bird left on his doorstep with a note, "This is what happens to love." We compared notes in my kitchen while Samantha made coffee. The harassment had patterns. Always late at night or early morning. Always targeting our connections to the deceased. Always escalating. Lucis had installed cameras too, but our stalker wore masks, kept kept his face hidden, smart enough to avoid anything legally actionable. Harold called that afternoon. 3 more group members had reported harassment. Jennifer's new boyfriend received anonymous letters detailing her daughter's death, asking if he could compete with a ghost. Linda found her husband's memorial bench at the park, covered in obscene graffiti. Even Keith, who wasn't dating anyone, got messages calling him a grief tourist for moving to a new apartment. We decided to meet at Harold's house that evening. Not an official group session, just those of us being targeted. 7 people crowded into his living room, comparing stories, looking for patterns. Samantha came with me, her hand tight in mine. She'd become part of this, whether she wanted to or not. The quiet man from group, we still didn't know his name, had been busy. Each victim received personalized harassment based on their loss, their progress, their attempts to heal. He knew details only someone from group would know. Private things we'd shared in that sacred space. Harold looked devastated. His whole philosophy centered on creating safe spaces for healing. This violation of trust went against everything he'd built. He'd already reported the situation to the church, but they were reluctant to ban someone from a support group without concrete proof. We tried to piece together what we knew about him. Late 30s, maybe early 40s, always alone. Claimed his wife died 5 years ago, but never shared details. Drove a dark sedan. Lucis remembered because he'd once offered him a ride. No one knew his last name. Harold's sign-in sheets only required first names for privacy. He'd written avoid, which we thought was odd, but hadn't questioned. Jennifer's boyfriend, Marcus, was a web developer. He offered to help trace the emails, maybe find digital breadcrumbs. But our stalker used VPNs, temporary email addresses, public Wi-Fi. He'd planned this carefully. The meeting ended with a promise to stay in touch, to document everything, to watch out for each other. But I saw the fear in everyone's eyes. We were being hunted by someone who saw our healing as betrayal, our happiness as sin. That night, Samantha and I lay awake talking. She refused to leave, refused to let fear win. But I saw how she checked the locks twice, how she startled at small sounds. This was my fault. My choice to love again had brought danger to her door. The escalation came faster after our meeting. Lucis woke to find his car windows smashed, glass covering the seats. Inside, printed emails between him and his new girlfriend, highlighted passages about moving forward. The violation of privacy made him physically sick. Jennifer's daughter's grave was next. Fresh flowers replaced with dead ones. A photo of Jennifer laughing with Marcus left under a rock with "She's watching you betray her" scrawled across it. Jennifer broke down completely, ended things with Marcus that same day. Our stalker claimed his first victory. I increased security measures, new locks, stronger doors, motion lights everywhere. Samantha's teenage kids stayed with their father for a while. We couldn't risk them being targeted. The house felt like a fortress, but fortresses can become prisons. The way this person keeps such detailed notes during grief support meetings makes me wonder what's really driving that behavior. Documenting everyone's healing journey seems like an odd way to process your own loss, doesn't it? Work became my only escape, but even there, paranoia followed. Every unknown caller could be him. Every email required scrutiny. I found myself checking parking lots, scanning faces, living in constant vigilance. Then Harold made a discovery. He'd been reviewing old sign-in sheets, cross-referencing dates. Avoid had started attending groups 6 months before his supposed wife died. He'd been collecting information, studying grief, learning our vulnerabilities long before claiming his own loss. The revelation chilled us. This wasn't crimes of passion or misguided grief. This was calculated predatory behavior. He'd infiltrated multiple groups, gathered intelligence, waited for the perfect moment to strike. We weren't dealing with a grieving widower, but a predator who fed on others' pain. Samantha suggested hiring a private investigator. The police wouldn't help, but maybe someone else could. The cost was steep, but what price do you put on safety? We pooled resources with Lucis, hired someone recommended by Samantha's divorce lawyer. 3 days later, the investigator had a name: David Crenshaw. No deceased wife, no tragic loss, just a history of fixation on grief forums online. Expelled from 2 previous support groups for inappropriate behavior. He lived alone in a rental house 20 minutes away, worked from home doing data entry. No social media presence, no friends anyone could find. The information should have made me feel better. Knowing had to be better than not knowing, but it made him more real, more dangerous. This wasn't grief-driven delusion, but calculated cruelty. We took the information to the police again. Different officer, same response. Without direct threats or physical violence, their hands were tied. Harassment was a misdemeanor at best. Document everything, they said. Get a restraining order, they said, as if paper could stop someone this determined. The group met again, this time at a restaurant instead of someone's home. Public felt safer. We shared the investigators' findings, discussed options. Legal routes seemed futile. Confrontation felt dangerous. Some wanted to flee. Jennifer was already looking at jobs in other cities. Others, like Lucis, burned with anger that demanded action. Harold proposed something unexpected. A trap. Use the group against him. Create a fake member with a perfect story of loss and healing. Someone who'd started dating. Bait him into revealing himself. It felt manipulative. Wrong. But what choice did we have? We spent hours crafting the perfect persona. Sarah, whose husband died in a workplace accident, just started seeing someone from her book club. Vulnerable, but hopeful. Marcus created online profiles. A digital footprint convincing enough to pass scrutiny. Harold would introduce her at the next meeting. But David moved first. That night, I woke to the smell of smoke. I scrambled out of bed, my heart hammering as the acrid smell grew stronger. Samantha grabbed her phone to call 911 while I rushed to the window. Orange light flickered against the fence where David had spray-painted his message. The wooden posts were burning, flames licking up toward the overhanging tree branches. I ran outside with a garden hose, spraying water frantically, while Samantha gave our address to the dispatcher. The fire wasn't large, but it was deliberate. Accelerant had been poured along the base of the fence. By the time firefighters arrived, I'd mostly contained it, but the message remained clear. This was escalation. The fire investigator confirmed arson. Gasoline had been used, probably from a portable container. No witnesses, no useful evidence, just another report to add to our growing file. The officer suggested we consider staying elsewhere for a few nights. I saw Samantha's jaw tighten at the suggestion. She wasn't running. Morning brought exhaustion and decisions. I called in sick to work, something I rarely did. Samantha canceled her classes. We spent the day reinforcing our defenses. New smoke detectors, fire extinguishers in every room, motion-activated sprinklers for the yard. The hardware store clerk probably thought we were doomsday preppers. Lucy showed up while we were installing outdoor cameras with night vision. He helped us mount them, sharing that he'd done the same after finding his girlfriend's car vandalized again. This time, David had left a photo of Elena under the windshield wiper with "She sees everything" written in red marker. We worked in grim silence, three people united by harassment from someone who couldn't accept that grief didn't mean eternal isolation. When we finished, Lucis mentioned he'd been researching David Crenshaw online, found old forum posts where David argued that remarrying after a spouse's death was spiritual adultery. The posts dated back 7 years, long before his supposed loss. That evening, Harold called an emergency meeting, not at the church. David might be watching there. Instead, we gathered at Linda's house, parking blocks away and walking to avoid detection. 12 of us crowded into her living room, the core group of targets plus a few others who'd started receiving minor harassment. Harold had news. He'd spoken with facilitators from other grief groups in neighboring counties. David had attended at least 4 different groups over the past 3 years, always with the same story about a wife who died 5 years ago. But the details changed. Cancer in one group, car accident in another, sewers lied in a third. He'd been asked to leave 2 groups for making members uncomfortable with his intense focus on their dating lives. Marcus had made progress too. He'd found David's work history through LinkedIn. Data entry jobs, all remote, never lasting more than a year. The pattern suggested someone who struggled with workplace relationships, probably due to the same obsessive behaviors we were experiencing. We discussed the trap plan in detail. Harold had already started planting seeds at the regular Wednesday meeting, mentioning that a new member named Sarah would be joining soon. He'd been careful to provide just enough details to pique David's interest. Recent widow, starting to date, feeling guilty about moving forward. Jennifer raised concerns about the ethics of deception. We were essentially catfishing someone, even if that someone was harassing us. But Keith, usually quiet, spoke up about feeling like a prisoner in his own life. He'd installed 3 deadbolts on his apartment door, slept with a baseball bat beside his bed. This wasn't living. The group agreed to move forward. Marcus would manage Sarah's online presence, creating social media profiles with enough history to seem real. We'd use stock photos of someone who looked appropriately vulnerable. Harold would introduce her story at the next meeting, gauge David's reaction. I volunteered to help with Sarah's backstory, drawing on my own experience to make it authentic. We gave her a husband named Tom, who died in a construction accident 14 months ago. She'd recently started seeing someone from her book club, feeling torn between honoring Tom's memory and embracing new happiness. It felt uncomfortably close to my own story. The meeting ended with safety protocols. Everyone would check in daily via group text. Any escalation would be immediately shared. We'd maintain normal routines as much as possible while staying vigilant. Nobody would confront David directly. Too dangerous and potentially legally problematic. Samantha and I drove home in silence, both processing the surreal turn our lives had taken. 6 months ago, my biggest concern was whether to keep Neil's clothes in the closet. Now, I was part of an elaborate scheme to trap a stalker who'd set my fence on fire. The next few days passed in tense normalcy. Work, meals, cautious ventures out. But everything felt different. I found myself constantly checking mirrors, scanning parking lots, starting at unexpected sounds. Samantha maintained her teaching schedule, but had the school increase security, claiming a family situation. David struck again on Thursday night, but not at our house. Linda woke to find her garden destroyed, every plant uprooted, soil scattered, her late husband's memorial rose bush hacked to pieces. A laminated photo of her husband was staked in the center of the devastation with "He planted these for you, not your new boyfriend," scrawled across it. Linda was devastated. Those roses had been her husband's pride, something she'd maintained for 3 years since his death. Her new boyfriend, Vic, helped her clean up the mess, but I could see her spirit breaking. This was what David wanted, to make moving forward so painful that we'd retreat into isolation. Friday brought a new development. Harold received an email from David, sent from an anonymous account. David claimed he knew about the fake Sarah plan, that we couldn't fool someone who understood true grief. He called us grief tourists, playing at loss while dishonoring the dead. The email ended with a promise. "I'll show you what real loss feels like." The threat changed everything. We had written evidence of harmful intent, something the police couldn't ignore. But when Harold took it to the station, they said it was still too vague. No specific threat of violence, no criminal act promised, just angry words from someone who could claim emotional distress. Marcus suggested a different approach. If David knew about Sarah, we could use that knowledge. Make him think we'd abandoned the plan while actually adapting it. Create a different trap, one he wouldn't expect. We spent hours refining the idea, building a new strategy. Instead of introducing Sarah at group, Harold would mention that several members were planning a memorial gathering, a chance to honor our lost loved ones while celebrating our resilience. He'd emphasize that new partners were welcome, that this was about integrating past and present. The event would be at a public park, daytime, plenty of witnesses. How did David figure out their fake Sarah plan so fast? The way he knew exactly what they were planning before they even started makes me wonder if someone in the group might be talking to him without realizing it. Or maybe he has other ways of watching them that they haven't discovered yet. We knew David would come. His obsession wouldn't let him miss seeing all his targets in one place, but we'd be ready. Marcus would set up hidden cameras. Several members' friends and family would attend, providing security through numbers. We'd document everything, create undeniable evidence of harassment. Saturday night, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Lucis, panic in his voice. He'd woken to sounds in his apartment, someone trying the door handle, testing windows. He'd called 911, but by the time police arrived, the intruder was gone. Only evidence was fresh scratches on the lock, suggesting attempted entry. I stayed on the phone with him until dawn, both of us sleepless and shaken. David was escalating beyond property damage and psychological warfare. He was testing physical boundaries, seeing how far he could push. The memorial gathering plan suddenly felt more urgent. Sunday passed in preparation. We coordinated with extended friend networks, people David wouldn't recognize. Samantha's teacher colleagues agreed to attend. Lucis's girlfriend brought her brothers. Jennifer's hiking club offered support. What started as a trap was becoming something else, a community standing against one man's twisted vision of grief. Harold sent the group email Monday morning, announcing the memorial gathering for the following Saturday. He stressed that this was about healing, about honoring our loved ones while embracing life. Partners, friends, and family were all welcome. The response was immediate and positive, with most members confirming attendance. David's response came that night, not to the group, but to each of us individually. Photos of our deceased loved ones' graves, all taken within the last 24 hours. He'd visited every cemetery, left dead flowers at each site. The message was clear. He knew where our loved ones rested, had access to these sacred spaces. I found myself at Neil's grave the next morning, replacing David's dead flowers with fresh ones, talking to Neil about this insanity, wondering what he'd think. Would he want me cowering in fear, or would he tell me to fight for the happiness I'd found? I knew the answer. Tuesday's grief group meeting was tense. David attended, sitting in his usual spot, taking his usual notes. But now, we all knew who he was, what he was doing. The elephant in the room was enormous. Harold managed the session professionally, but I could see the strain in his eyes. When I shared about planning the memorial gathering, David's pen moved furiously. When Linda mentioned bringing her boyfriend, his knuckles went white. When Jennifer talked about healing through new connections, he actually snorted in derision. Harold had to remind him about respectful listening. After the meeting, we implemented our safety protocol. Everyone left in groups, checking that no one was followed. Samantha picked me up, having insisted on being my transportation. As we pulled away, I saw David in the parking lot, watching, always watching. Wednesday brought a disturbing discovery. Keith found a package at his door, photos of himself taken over several weeks. At the gym, grocery shopping, having coffee with friends, hundreds of images documenting his daily life. The violation was staggering. David had been stalking all of us far longer and more extensively than we'd realized. We met again that night, this time at Samantha's school after hours. The empty classrooms felt safer than our homes. Looking at Keith's photos, we realized the depth of David's obsession. This wasn't just about our grief group. He'd made us his full-time occupation. Marcus had an idea. If David was documenting us, we should document him, turn his tactics around. We divided into teams, planning to discreetly photograph David whenever spotted, build our own evidence file. It felt invasive, but what choice did we have? Thursday morning, I spotted David at my coffee shop. I managed to take several photos while pretending to text. He sat alone, laptop open, probably working his data entry job. He looked ordinary, unremarkable, just another middle-aged man having coffee. The banality of evil was unsettling. Lucis texted that afternoon. He'd seen David at the library where his girlfriend worked, just sitting, reading newspapers, watching her at the reference desk. When she went to lunch, David followed at a distance. Lucis managed to record video on his phone, capturing the stalking behavior. By Friday, we had dozens of images and videos. David at various locations, always watching one of us. The pattern was clear. He had a rotation, checking on different targets throughout the day. His remote work allowed him flexibility to maintain this surveillance. We were his job, his obsession, his purpose. The memorial gathering was tomorrow. Final preparations were underway. Marcus had cameras positioned around the park pavilion we'd reserved. Friends and allies were briefed on David's appearance, told to document any concerning behavior. We'd created a phone tree for rapid communication if needed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Samantha dozed beside me, but I lay awake planning contingencies. What if David did more than watch? What if he brought weapons? What if our plan backfired? But underneath the fear was determination. We couldn't live like this forever. Morning came too soon. The memorial gathering was set for 2 p.m., but we arrived early to set up. Tables for food, chairs in circles for sharing, a memory board where people could post photos of lost loved ones. It looked like what it pretended to be, a healing event for grieving people. By 1:30, people started arriving. Group members with their partners, friends, family. The pavilion filled with nervous energy disguised as casual conversation. Everyone knew the real purpose, but we maintained the facade. Harold welcomed people warmly, encouraging them to share memories when ready. David arrived at exactly 2 p.m. He walked straight toward our pavilion, carrying a small cooler and wearing sunglasses that didn't hide his darting eyes. Everyone tensed. Harold intercepted him at the entrance, greeting him with forced warmth while subtly positioning himself between David and the rest of us. I watched David scan the crowd, his gaze lingering on each couple. When he spotted me with Samantha, his jaw clenched. He set his cooler on a table and pulled out a camera, not even pretending to be subtle about photographing us. Marcus gave a slight nod from across the pavilion. Our cameras were rolling. Every move David made was being documented. Lucis stood near the memory board with his girlfriend, both watching David's movements while pretending to arrange photos. The gathering proceeded with careful normalcy. People shared stories about their lost loved ones, pinned photos to the memory board, ate potluck dishes, but underneath ran an electric current of vigilance. David circled the pavilion like a shark, taking pictures, scribbling in his notebook, occasionally muttering to himself. When Linda's boyfriend Vic arrived, David's agitation increased visibly. He approached their table, standing too close, photographing the memorial photo of Linda's husband. Vic stepped between them, and for a moment I thought David might escalate. But Harold appeared, gently steering David toward the food table. Jennifer arrived late, alone. She'd ended things with Marcus after the grave incident, but she came anyway, brave in her grief. David immediately focused on her, following at a distance as she moved through the crowd. Several of us formed a subtle barrier, keeping ourselves between them. The tension ratcheted higher when David opened his cooler. Instead of food, he pulled out laminated photos, images of all our deceased loved ones. He began placing them on tables, under plates, tucking them into the memorial board between our photos. Each one had writing on the back. I saw Linda go pale when she found one. Samantha grabbed the photo David had slipped under her purse. Neil's face stared up at us, with "He's watching you betray him" scrawled across it in red marker. My hands shook, but Samantha squeezed my shoulder, keeping me grounded. Harold tried to maintain order, asking David to remove the photos. David refused, loudly proclaiming this was a memorial, that the dead deserved representation. His voice carried across the pavilion, drawing stares from other park visitors. This was what we'd wanted, witnesses to his behavior. Keith's friend, a off-duty security guard, moved closer to David, not threatening, just present. David noticed, his movements becoming more erratic. He pulled out more photos, throwing them onto tables, the ground, anywhere people would find them. Then he made his mistake. He grabbed Jennifer's arm as she tried to leave, spinning her around. She cried out, more from surprise than pain, but it was enough. The security guard and two of Lucis's girlfriend's brothers immediately intervened, forming a wall between David and Jennifer. David exploded. Not physically, he was too calculating for that, but verbally, his careful control finally cracking. He ranted about betrayal, about sacred vows, about the dishonor we'd brought to our loved ones' memories. Every word was being captured by multiple cameras and phones. Harold stepped forward, using his facilitator voice, trying to calm the situation. But David turned on him, accusing him of enabling spiritual adultery, of corrupting the sacred space of grief. He pulled out a folder, throwing papers into the air, printouts of online posts, photos he'd taken of us, copies of emails he'd sent, the papers scattered across the pavilion. I saw photos of myself at Neil's grave, Samantha's teaching schedule, Linda's home address, Keith's gym routine. The extent of his surveillance laid bare for everyone to see. Parents pulled their children closer. Other park visitors stopped to stare. Marcus had been live streaming to a private group, not for public consumption, but for evidence. Something about David bringing laminated photos with messages written on them feels strangely planned out, like he sat at home making these, picking which words to write, maybe even practicing his big scene. He captured David admitting to following us, to sending the emails, to visiting the graves. David was so focused on his righteousness that he didn't realize he was confessing to months of harassment. Lucis stepped forward, holding up his phone. He played the video of David following his girlfriend at the library. Then Keith showed the photos David had taken of him. Linda displayed the image of her destroyed garden. One by one, we presented our evidence, surrounding David with proof of his obsession. David's face went through a series of transformations. Rage, disbelief, something that might have been fear. He tried to grab phones to stop the documentation, but there were too many of us. For the first time, he was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Harold made the call to park security, not police. We'd agreed to avoid that route, but uniformed presence that would make David understand his behavior had consequences. While we waited, we maintained our circle, keeping David contained without touching him. He tried to leave, but Vic and the security guard blocked his path, not aggressively, just present. David pulled out his own phone, frantically typing, maybe trying to delete evidence or send more messages. But Marcus had thought of that. He'd set up a signal jammer in his car, perfectly legal for private use. David's phone had no connection. Park security arrived in minutes. Harold explained the situation, showing them some of the photos David had distributed, the evidence of harassment. The security officers recognized several of us. We'd all filed reports over the past weeks. They knew who David was. They asked David to leave the park. He refused, claiming he had every right to attend a public gathering. But when they mentioned calling actual police, reviewing security footage, potentially pressing charges for the grabbed arm incident with Jennifer, David's resistance crumbled. He gathered his cooler, his camera, some of the scattered papers. As he left, he turned back to us, his face twisted with contempt. He opened his mouth to speak, probably to deliver some final condemnation, but Harold raised his hand. The gesture was simple but powerful. No more words. David's mouth snapped shut. We watched him walk to his car, security following at a distance. He sat in his vehicle for long minutes, probably trying to figure out his next move. But what could he do? We'd exposed him, documented everything, shown his true nature to dozens of witnesses. Finally, he drove away. We maintained our positions until his car disappeared from view. Then, collectively, we exhaled. Jennifer started crying. Relief, not fear. Linda hugged Vic. Keith actually smiled. We'd done it. We'd faced him down together. The gathering continued, but the energy had shifted. We cleaned up David's scattered photos and papers, saving them as evidence. Harold led us in an actual memorial ceremony, honoring our lost loved ones and our own resilience. It felt like reclaiming something David had tried to steal. Over the next hour, people shared stories, not just of loss, but of healing, of finding joy again, of the courage it took to open their hearts. Samantha spoke about accepting that loving me meant loving Neil's memory too. Lucis talked about how Elena would have wanted him to find happiness. Even Jennifer, still raw from her ended relationship, spoke about not letting fear dictate her future. As the gathering wound down, we made plans. Harold Harold would report David's behavior to other grief groups in the area, warning them. Marcus would compile all our documentation into a comprehensive file. We'd seek restraining orders as a group, harder to ignore than individual complaints. Most importantly, we'd return to our Wednesday night meetings. David had driven us from that sacred space, but we wouldn't let him keep us away. Harold had already spoken to the church about increased security, and several members' friends had volunteered to attend meetings as observers. The next few days were tense. We waited for retaliation, for escalation, for David to make his next move, but nothing came. No emails, no vandalism, no late-night appearances. Marcus checked the online forums where David had posted. His accounts had gone silent. A week later, Harold got a call from a grief group facilitator 2 counties over. David had shown up there trying to join, but they'd been warned. When confronted about his history, he'd left without argument. The word was spreading. His hunting ground was shrinking. We maintained vigilance, but slowly resumed normal life. Samantha's kids came back home. Linda replanted her garden with Vic's help. Keith removed one of his 3 deadbolts. Small steps toward reclaiming our peace. 3 weeks after the memorial gathering, I saw David at a grocery store. He saw me too, started to approach, then noticed Samantha beside me. Something in his face changed. Not fear exactly, but recognition that his power was gone. He turned and walked away without a word. Harold had been right about holding space for each other. We'd held space against someone who tried to weaponize our grief, and we'd won. Not through violence or legal battles, but through community, documentation, and refusing to be isolated. The restraining orders went through eventually, harder to ignore when filed by 8 people with extensive documentation. David didn't contest them. Maybe he'd moved on to other hunting grounds, or maybe being exposed had broken his pattern. We didn't know and tried not to care. Our Wednesday night group felt different now, stronger. We'd been tested and survived. New members joined, including some who'd heard about what happened and felt safer knowing we protected each other. Harold incorporated safety discussions into our sessions, teaching others to recognize warning signs. Thanks for letting me wonder and explore right alongside you. It's been a genuinely fascinating ride, until our paths cross again. Like the video, it helps more than you think.